Talkopolis, the social media TV network for your city.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brad Hopkins.
And I'm Derek Mason.
Our show is called Player to Player, and we're downtown Franklin, Tennessee at Classic Sports Barbershop.
We're in an actual barbershop. And what barbershop don't you know that have louder and opinionated barbers? That's why Tony Steele and Brian Cresson come in.
I'm going to tell you what, looking at this barbershop, not only does it have the hardwood floors and plasma screens like any other sports paraphernalia store would, but it's also got classic barbershop chairs. Tell us about these barbershop chairs, Tony. Oh, see, you got hydraulics on these things. Whoa, check it out.
1950s.
Yeah, and we're also...
I wasn't born when they was getting people service then.
Yeah, you probably weren't either. But then looking at that beard, you might have been.
We can take care of that here.
We're brought to you by Fidelity Motors, 1207 Festus Lane. I mean, you know where to go to get your head game right. When you're going to go out looking nice and sharp, you got to come to Classic Sports. But if you want to get your car game right, you got to go see my boy, Michael Spurgeon, at Fidelity Motors. They've got all kinds of classics, whether you're talking about Chevelles and Impalas to even the newer things, Maseratis, Ferraris. They've got what you're looking for, definitely.
Well, Brad, listen. There were awesome games this week. Let's get right into it.
Yeah.
First game, New Orleans and Seattle. Now tell me, I got a question for you here. Is it true about Drew Brees, the weather? How much did the weather affect him? Do you think it really affected him that much?
I didn't think so. Now, I know 34 yards in the first half, that's not Drew Brees kind of numbers, okay? But when you can take Jimmy Graham, who has obviously been his mainstay, a guy that he's found on numerous occasions in that offense, when you can limit him to one reception for 8 yards, you pretty much got control of the New Orleans Saints. And that's what happened on Saturday.
So do you think the weather or even the glove, because I saw two gloves on,
Right.
do you think that had anything to do with his accuracy?
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe I could flip that back to you. If you do something that you don't normally do, I mean, obviously for the full 17 weeks, we didn't see Drew Brees wearing any gloves. Now, whether being a part of the issue later on in December, early January, you can see where they wear them. But how did that affect his performance when you were playing in your 15 years? I mean, if you did something that wasn't normally what you did during the week of practice, how did it affect you going into the weekend's
To me, I think it affected him from this standpoint. Is gloves are great in the cold weather,
Right.
But when you're talking cold weather and rain, there's no need to have them on. That's why you see a lot of receivers when it's raining. A lot of receivers that are confident in their hands, they take the gloves off. And I felt that Drew Brees, especially the second half, when it continued to rain, that he should have took the gloves off. Now, he became a lot more accurate in the second half,
Right.
But I just think in the first half, that really hampered him a lot.
I'm not sure if second half adjustments didn't, come into the factor as them playing better in the second half. But I've also got to think that maybe that taco shell-shaped stadium that they're playing up there in CenturyLink Field up in Seattle,
Yeah.
I mean, they're talking about that being the loudest place to play. The 12th man is such a huge factor. Maybe that's one of the reasons why they only lost one game, and I think the last 17 up in Seattle.
Yeah, it's a major factor. I think they have one of the if not one of the loudest stadiums in all professional sports, and I'm talking about football here. It's hard to go play in there. I've played in there several times. The sounds are deafening, especially if you're on your own 5 or 10 yard line,
Right.
And you're backed up, and those fans get really loud.
Yeah, so when obviously you have loud crowd noise, when you have adverse weather conditions, and you're on the road, you're going to want to rely on a strong rushing attack. Pierre Thomas, the workhorse for the New Orleans Saints, hadn't been in there, and obviously he wasn't active for this game, which left most of the work to be done to Mark Ingram. He didn't quite get it done on the ground.
No, I know he didn't. I think he ran a little timid at times. I think the first half he ran a lot better in the first half than did in the second half for a reason I don't know. Maybe because they had to kind of abandon the running game because they were down 2 scores. But vintage Drew Brees, he brought them back to within 1 score, and they had an opportunity to win the game.
Yeah, and you cannot forget about Marshawn Lynch, the beast.
The Skittle Man.
The Skittle Man. 28 carries for 140 yards. I mean, that guy's been doing it consistently for 17 weeks. If the Seattle Seahawks are going to bring home a championship to the state of Washington, I think they're probably going to do it on the legs of Marshawn Lynch.
They're going to have to ride his back because, as you saw in the game, Russell Wilson wasn't as accurate either.
Right.
And that's why I always go back to did the weather have a factor in both of the quarterbacks? So I think moving forward, they got to play in Seattle again.
Right.
Even though it's a home field advantage, they don't know what the weather's going to be. And if the weather's anything like it was this past weekend, then I think they're going to have to ride the back of Marshawn Lynch, rushing for 140-plus yards. I think if they do that, they have a good shot at winning this football game.
Before we move on to the AFC's matchup on that Saturday. I have to ask you, looking at Russell Wilson's numbers, the last game that they played against Arizona, I think he threw for almost like 101 yards, 103 yards. And we saw how ineffective he was on Saturday, even though Marshawn Lynch got it done on the ground. Russell Wilson really pretty much hasn't shown up, and he's been a cog for that offense all year.
Yeah, he hasn't. I think he was 9 for 18, barely got over 100 yards this past game. But like you said, they were on the backs of Marshawn Lynch, and I think that's how they're going to ride this thing out. Because one, Percy Harvin, who they thought was going to be in the lineup, ended up getting injured again this past week with a concussion. So that's one of their big weapons. When you lose guys like that, it makes it hard for you to run your offense the way you want to run it. So I think, and I think ultimately they're going to have to ride Marshawn Lynch all the way to the Super Bowl.
A lot of people don't understand how injuries affect the game. When you've had a whole week of preparation doing things one certain way, and then that element is taken from the game, there's a whole bunch of adjustments that have to be made. And that's obviously what you see whenever a guy like Russell Wilson doesn't show up or a guy like Marshawn Lynch gets hurt. They have to make those adjustments.
But I mean, adjustments are a part of the game. They understand that. And whatever adjustments that the Seattle Seahawks made in the second half, obviously it helped them win the ball game.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's switch sides right now, talking about the Colts going up and seeing Tom Brady and New England Patriots. And I think the people were looking at the last weekend's game where the Colts found themselves down by a handful of points. 3 interceptions in the first half for Andrew Luck. He rebounds nicely to throw 4 touchdowns and over 400 yards in the second half. People thought that was going to happen again, even late in that ball game against the Patriots, but it didn't, did it?
Well, the thing you got to understand is this: they were not playing against Tom Brady last week. Okay, they were not playing against a Tom Brady-led team. So anytime you're down 2-3 scores is very hard. I don't care who your quarterback is. Right. It's very hard to come back. And then you got Bill Belichick, anchoring the defense as far as the schemes and calls or whatnot. So for Andrew Luck, it was critical for him to come out and start strong. He did, but I think ultimately they got down too many points, and he started to press. You saw the 4 interceptions was not because, he didn't know what to do with the ball, but I think more or less is him trying to make a play, him pressing.
Right. Well, looking at Andrew Luck himself, let's just focus for a second here. What quarterback can you speak glowingly of after a loss who's thrown 7 interceptions in the postseason and still you have just an upbeat feel about the guy as a quarterback? How many quarterbacks in this league can do that?
No, I mean, when you're talking quarterbacks, there's probably only 2, and they're veteran quarterbacks because they got a history. And when you talk about a young quarterback, if a young quarterback throws 7 interceptions in a span of 2 games, you are not looking at him in the future and saying, this is our guy. You're looking at him like we might have to replace him next year. Right. But in Andrew Luck's situation, he's proven that even though he might throw interceptions, he will bring you back, as he did last week against the Kansas City Chiefs.
Normally you see Tom Brady being the focal piece of New England's offense, but when you got a guy like LeGarrette Blount who runs for 4 touchdowns in the game, 4 touchdowns in the game. We saw him rattle off that 73-yard rush later on in the ball game to actually put the nail in the coffin. Where did this dude come from?
That's who they couldn't stop.
Exactly.
You're right about that, Tony.
Nobody else. They couldn't stop him.
You're right about that.
Dude.
Just one guy. But why is that? Why was he so effective, Derek?
I think what it is, it's a power running game. And I don't think the Indianapolis Colts were ready for a power running game. I think they were ready for, even though the prior 3 games, Tom Brady didn't throw the ball much, but I think Indianapolis and Coach Pagano felt that coming into this game that Tom Brady, excuse me.
You still do that,
exactly,
don't you? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Tom Brady was going to throw the ball and try to win the game through the air. But I think Brian Belichick, as well as Tom Brady, figured that if we're going to ride this thing to the Super Bowl, we got to ride it on the backs of our running backs. And why not do it with Blount, who's a bigger, more physical back? And I don't think Indianapolis was ready for that. And what you got to understand is that there's a glowing stat about the New England Patriots for the last 3 or 4 games. Tom Brady has only thrown 75 passes, I think 75 or 78 passes. And that's never happened. I'm not going to say it's never happened, but the last time it happened, they went to the Super Bowl. So I guess that stat kind of bodes well for the New England Patriots.
Yeah, in Sunday's contest, 49ers at the Panthers. What did you see extraordinary in that game?
What I saw was 49ers' ability to shut down Kaepernick. They did it. Well, no, excuse
Yeah,
me.
you mean
I'm
Cam
totally
Newton.
getting confused.
I got you.
Cam Newton. The first game prior when they played him during the season, Cam Newton, he didn't have a great game, but you saw his presence there in the game. I think this go around, the San Francisco 49ers were ready for Cam Newton, and maybe the stage was just a tad bit too big for Cam.
Yeah, definitely a personal game for Colin Kaepernick. We saw him mention the rematch between the Carolina Panthers immediately following the Green Bay Packers win. So, and obviously 35 picks later in that same, in the same draft year, Colin Kaepernick holds that relationship to Cam Newton pretty closely because he obviously wants to be Cam Newton and sort of wants to be him in that, he wants to have that same kind of credentials as Cam Newton has, and he's working very hard to get that.
Yeah, I think he is, but I think the part that Kaepernick looks at is that I've taken my team to a Super Bowl. This will be my second AFC Championship game. This guy was drafted higher than me, but yet and still he gets more notoriety, more popularity. He's more popular than I am. So the only way to kind of diffuse that is to beat him when I play against him. And each time, with the exception of once this year, he's been able to do just that.
You're right. And let's wrap up our weekend's action as the San Diego Chargers go up to Denver to take on Peyton Manning and the Broncos. It wasn't like the first time around where you see these two teams play competitively. Phillip Rivers is, I think, 6-2 in Mile High Stadium, but Peyton Manning and the boys came ready to play this past week.
Yeah, they did. If you saw the game plan, they did exactly what the New England Patriots did: run the football. They rolled Knowshon Moreno all the way to the AFC Championship game, and I think moving forward, that's what they're going to do. They're going to ride their running backs all the way to the Super Bowl. Hopefully, in their case, Knowshon Moreno had one of the best seasons he's ever had in NFL. I think he rushed over 1,200 yards, double-digit touchdowns. So, even with the Peyton Manning as your quarterback, you still have to have some remnants of a running game. What you don't understand is last year this happened as well, but Knowshon Moreno ended up getting hurt in the third quarter, and then the Baltimore Ravens came back and ended up winning the game.
So much action to talk about, but we can sit here all day and talk about it. We are at Classic Sports Barbershop, Franklin, Tennessee, downtown. Come and see Tony and Brian. I'm sure they get you cut up right. And don't forget about Fidelity Motors, too. 1207 Festus Lane, downtown Nashville. They can get you right as far as you're looking for a ride. Whether it's an antique, something new, something used, they've got exactly what you're looking for. Stay tuned. We'll be back with another segment of Player to Player. I'm Brad Hopkins.
And I'm Derek Mason.